Now, we have a really fascinating topic to unpack today. We're going to dig deep into a highly popular psychological framework all about post-breakup dynamics. Specifically, we're exploring why those standard run-of-the-mill no-contact strategies so often completely fail, and what the source material claims is actually required to reclaim your personal power and ultimately your inner peace.
Okay, let's dive into this, because it's so interesting where this source actually starts. It immediately challenges a super common assumption in modern dating, the whole idea that just going silent and ignoring texts is some kind of ultimate power move. The core premise here is that simply stopping your outreach, well, it's actually a weak, expected maneuver. It doesn't inherently change any of the underlying dynamics of the relationship or the breakup itself.
There's this really striking quote right from the material that says, "Simply staying away does not flip the balance of power." The source points out a pretty harsh reality here. Women have generally seen men go quiet before. They're often already psychologically braced for this whole no-contact phase. So physical distance alone, without any real genuine internal transformation on your part, is honestly just a waiting game. And unfortunately, it's a game your ex-partner is probably already prepared to play.
Which brings us to our first major concept, shattering the pedestal, and what the source calls the false picture.
So if standard no contact isn't the magic answer, what exactly is? Well, before you can make any real progress, the framework insists you have to critically analyze exactly who it is you're grieving. It calls this the false picture. Think about it, that intense, heavy post-breakup pain, it often doesn't actually come from mourning the flawed, real person you were with. Instead, you're mourning an invented, totally perfect persona. You're grieving an idealized character built out of your own hopes, your deep loyalty, and your need for love, completely divorced from the reality of the person sitting across from you.
Now, to test that fantasy against actual reality, the source asks you to look at a few contradictory behaviors. You've got to objectively compare that perfect mental picture you're holding onto against these specific, dismissive actions. Did she leave without giving you a clear reason? Did she drop these tiny little crumbs of attention just to keep you hooked? Did she constantly play the victim or move on while you were clearly still hurting? By forcing this direct comparison, the framework basically gives you a way to take the ex off the pedestal, take her off the shelf, and see the cold, hard reality of the situation.
Let's move to our next idea and see how this builds. Physical versus emotional absence.
So now that we've shattered the pedestal, we really need to understand the critical difference between superficial distance and true emotional unreachability. Understanding this is absolutely vital to the whole philosophy. On one hand, you have physical silence, blocking numbers, ignoring text for a few days. The framework describes this as the absolute lowest level of what's possible. It's totally surface level. Emotional silence, however, is the core requirement. This actually means stopping your emotional leaks and genuinely reclaiming your inner peace. It's about fundamentally detaching, rather than just pretending you aren't staring at your phone waiting for a notification.
The framework claims very strongly that there are these subtle behaviors that act as emotional leaks. We're talking about posting on social media, secretly hoping she notices, sending those supposedly casual check-in messages, stalking her online profile, or reacting to mutual drama. Literally every single time you do these things, it proves to your ex that she is still in complete charge of your heart rate. If just seeing her name online makes your pulse spike, well, she still holds the power, whether you're actually talking to her or not.
To sever that emotional remote control, the source outlines a very specific progression. First, you have to stop reacting to the drama. Then, actively reclaim your inner peace. And finally, stop giving away your validation. By following these steps, the framework states that you actually become the boss of your own inner world. You are no longer allowing some outside force to just dictate your daily emotional weather.
This takes us to Section 3, the silent workshop, and how we go about redefining the void.
There's this brilliantly vivid metaphor used in the source material for the isolation period that hits right after a breakup. It's all about completely redefining that empty void left behind. You can basically view this empty space in one of two ways. It's either a waiting room or it's a workshop. The waiting room is just counting the days, checking your phone, and basically just enduring the silence. The source argues that simply enduring the silence is just weakness dressed up as patience. The alternative is the workshop. That means going inward, building unbreakable self-control, and focusing on some serious personal growth. Actually owning the silence, rather than just surviving it, is where the real power lives.
I really want you to let this concept sink in. The source says, real transformation does not need witnesses, it just needs consistency. It's incredibly insistent here that rebuilding yourself has to happen in the dark. It absolutely cannot be performative. If you're out there improving yourself just so you can post it on your social media feed, secretly hoping she sees it, you're actually still just sitting in the waiting room. True transformation happens when there's absolutely no audience at all.
Which smoothly brings us to Section 4, the reflection, and how silence shifts dynamics. So what actually happens when you achieve this kind of silence? Well, the source maps out a predicted timeline of the psychological reactions an ex goes through when she is suddenly starved of all validation. Within just days of facing a steady, non-reactive absence from you, instead of the begging or the attention she expected, doubt begins to creep into her mind. Over a few weeks without that emotional validation, her confidence quietly starts to come apart. And over months, as you grow and change in total silence, that's when unexpected regret finally lands. And this brilliantly illustrates the ultimate effect of this strategy. You become a question she simply can't answer. Your calm, steady absence literally acts as a mirror. Without the distraction of dramatic arguments or you constantly chasing her, she's forced to just face her own choices and her own reflection.
Moving on to Section 5, forgiveness, which is framed as the ultimate release.
Now this brings us to what might just be the most counterintuitive climax of the entire framework. You might be sitting there thinking this whole process is fueled by anger, but the source claims that true victory requires letting go of that anger completely. It states, forgiveness is the act of putting down the weight so you can finally move at full speed. And it's absolutely crucial to note here, the source views forgiveness impartially. It's not at all about excusing bad behavior or saying what happened was okay. It's presented purely as a strategic release of emotional baggage.
You can really see the stark contrast between these two states. Carrying anger is exactly like carrying a massive weight. It means she's still living rent-free in your head. You're tied to the past, feeling heavy and bitter. Quiet forgiveness, on the other hand, represents this incredible lightness of freedom. It means there's simply no room left for her anymore. You become lighter, hyper-focused, and capable of steady forward movement. The framework really emphasizes this silent putting down of anger as the ultimate empowering move.
And that perfectly summarizes the overarching philosophy here. Pain is not a dead end. It is raw material. The framework urges you to take all that hurt, all that anger, the loneliness, and use literally every single bit of it as fuel. It's all about becoming sharper, more disciplined, and stronger from the inside out. You're taking the very fire that burned you to forge something completely new and unbreakable.
Which leaves us with this final, incredibly provocative question from the framework: who could you become if you stopped looking back to see who is watching? The ultimate takeaway here is that the real loss doesn't happen the day a relationship ends. No, the real loss happens if you refuse to grow from it. The true victory is the day you genuinely stop caring if she is watching you build your new life. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Now take this framework and go build your workshop.